How you doing, Braxton? Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can.
Oh, well, hey, good, Braxton. Good to see you.
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. This, normally we have, we don't have kids normally on these morning things, but it's good you're here. So good to see you.
Wait, so you only sent this link to
No, I sent it to you. But it's just kids normally don't, maybe we did have a kid last week. I can't remember, to be honest. Let me see, wait a few more minutes. There we go. Can you read that on the board behind you, by the way?
Somewhat. The week before the match.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, okay. I'll try. Yeah, it's a bit small. I'll try and I'm going to try and I'll have to read it out. Let's see here. Speaker view. Ooh. Speaker view there. Gallery view. Minutes. Yeah, and I don't know if I sent you the. We've done like last week. We did one on. We did a doubles thing last week, and the week before, I think we did one on mental relaxation skills. I don't know if I sent you those. Did I send you those?
Oh no, but
okay. I'll send you that. Maybe I'll say it's all recorded.
Okay.
So I can. I mean, if you're interested. Last week was on doubles. The person coming on actually was in that doubles video, and the week before was on relaxation skills. Hey, Paddy. How you doing, Paddy?
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Paddy. How you doing?
Doing well. How about you?
Good, good. I can certainly. This is recorded, so Braxton, I can send you that. Wait a few more minutes. I don't know, it's a bit small, Paddy. There's some writing on the back there. This is a summary of the talk today, but you probably can't read it. So
no.
I wonder if I can move it a bit closer, actually. Let me try and move it a bit closer. Let's see here. It's a bit better.
Not really. I can. The tennis court with the balls, or the red and the blue, shows up really well, but the writing I can't really read it.
Okay, well, that's all right.
But we'll trust you to read it to us.
Probably too small.
Probably needs to be darker, maybe. I don't know, but it's okay. You can read it. I mean, I can see that it's 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's 4,
but I can't really see what comes after it.
All right.
It's all right. You can read it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it'd be nice for you to write down, but that's all right. Wait a few more minutes. All right. Well, the feelings are on, but I can't. I don't know if they can hear me or not. Their microphone is off, but.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Oh, they haven't got the video on. All right. Let's get started. Let's get started. So, match preparation. The week. Playing a tournament or a league match on the weekends, and then we're going to go through how to prepare for it, like basically from 7 days out up to the actual match itself. And there's a various number of stages that professional players do that we're going to try and incorporate in your game. And obviously, some practical issues as well. You know, professionals, they lead Spartan lives, and people that aren't pros are not. But so I tried to basically summarize things that are practical, you can practically do without being a professional tennis player. But the first one, and I know the board is, you can't read it, but I'll read it out. So the first thing is the week before the match starts, you know, maybe 7 days before the match, you're playing a match or a league match on the weekend or a tournament on the weekends. And what is the ideal way to practice for a match before the weekend? And there's two things. There's two ways to practice. Should we be drilling individual strokes, you know, like on a ball machine, or should you be playing out points? That's the other option. Both of those two things, by the way, you know, tennis is an open skilled sport. And so that means the environment is random. The ball coming towards you has different speeds, spin heights. You've got to get in position. So you're never going to hit the same shot twice. And so we talk about how to prepare. Should we be training in an environment that's completely random? That'll be like playing out points. Or should we be controlling the environment, making it more predictable? So, for example, on a ball machine, you know where the ball's going. Or should you do a combination of both? And there's a lot of science on it, but it doesn't really get passed down to people that play tennis. But really, the answer to that question, should you be doing stuff on the ball machine or hitting against a wall or hitting with a coach, or should you be playing out points with your friends? It depends on whether you're in a group setting or you're practicing by yourself. Now, group settings, that would be like a team practice. So a team practice would be considered a group setting. And in a group setting, obviously, you should be playing out, maybe not obvious, but because a lot of team practices don't do this, but in a proper team practice, you should be spending most of the time playing out points. Now, I know with our members, our adults like coaches to kind of feed them balls in line drills to get warmed up. They prefer that than actually hitting with each other. But outside the warm-up, the 10-minute warm-up, most of the time, if you're with friends or you're in a clinic, you should be playing out points. But coaches tend to do the opposite. They like to control the environment and they like to work on form. But playing out points is far more beneficial for a number of reasons. Obviously, especially with juniors, it's much more fun because they want to play tennis, they want to work on technique. But also from a motor learning standpoint, playing out points, it triggers the same movements that you're actually going to do in an actual game. And so it's functional training. And functional training in its purest form is doing the actual activity itself. And that means playing out points. But also playing out points as opposed to just doing line drills, playing out points produces match tough players. It kind of, under pressure, people that play out points most of the time seem to win all those critical points under pressure. But the most important reason why in a team practice, or if you're a friend, you should be playing out points rather than drilling individual strokes, is that you just, in a team practice, you just can't get the quality reps necessary to improve. You're going to be in a line, the coach is going to feed you balls, and you're going to go to the back of the line. So really, in team practices, you want to be playing out points. You want to think of a team practice. Think of a team practice as doing a practice exam before the final. When you're doing a final exam, you shouldn't be learning new material. And the same goes for team practices. You're trying to reinforce existing skills. And so, and we've done this in the past, and we go back and forth in meetings over this all the time. My view is that when you're doing a team practice, you should not be working on tactics that you're not going to use in a match. So we're teaching players that in doubles, they stay back on the baseline and we're doing a team practice now, and we're telling them to come to the net. You know, and the argument is, well, we're trying to teach long-term development. But really, a team practice, you shouldn't be working on long-term development or new material. You should be preparing them for that upcoming match. And obviously, you know, if you only see someone once a week, you know, you don't want to be the same next year as they are this year. That's why we do that. But really, I think getting people to do stuff they're not going to do in a match is inappropriate. And it's always my pet peeve when coaches start working on technique during a team practice rather than playing games. Or pumping them up with confidence. It's just not the time and place for that. But there's a big debate about that because a lot of coaches say, well, you know, they're only going to be with us 1 day a week and we have to develop them as players. You know, my view, if that is the case, if that's your position, then they should be playing league. You know, they should be playing matches. I mean, if you're playing matches, that's the cornerstone to what you're doing. The other thing about the week before the match is you should be doing match practice. Now, team practices, if you're doing a team practice, obviously, and we do a lesson plan of a team practice, that includes some match practice during a lesson, you know, but really there's no substitute for playing 1 or 2 practice sets before the weekends. Practice set, and it's, you know, and I know people have time constraints, but playing a practice set gives you a greater chance of being able to win the critical points in your weekend match. And we see this all the time, you know, when you come up against, you know, we actually ask teams when our adults play matches, and sometimes even our juniors, we ask them, you know, before or after if they play practice matches, if they win, and almost always they say yes. But when you come up against teams that are more accurate and more consistent than you, you know, that they seem to hit the ball where you're not, and they seem to win all the game points when you're at deuce. You know, you say, well, the score was close. Well, it wasn't really. They're winning all the game points at deuce. That's really what a definition of tennis is, by the way. It's how you play the critical points. But if they're winning those points all the time, that's the reason. And we ask that question all the time when we look at a match and they're winning the critical points or they're hitting more accurate. And we say, did you play practice matches in a week? Almost, not always. Sometimes there is a ability level thing. But most of the time when the ability level is very close, the teams that win play practice matches. They have a much higher ratio between practice matches and league matches. There's a clear correlation with that. Now, ideally, when you play practice matches, you should be playing against players slightly better than you. But obviously, as we know, or kids, you might not know this yet, but adults do, is that typically when you play a practice match against a superior team, the superior team plays flat emotionally and they play sloppy technically. You know, this basically produces, when you have that culture, you know, produces basically weak players, because the stronger players play the weaker players weakly. And you know, the stronger players, they just go through the motions, playing like they're too good to be on the court with whom, you know, the coach is assigned to play with. And that's a major problem. You know, so for a team to be successful, as coaches, we're trying to eliminate that, what we call a tennis snob mentality. You know, so when you play weaker players, the stronger players obviously should be working on strategic weaknesses and, you know, attacking the net. You know, hitting put away volleys at the net player, or working on maybe a technical weakness such as hitting underspin shots all the time. But obviously, you know, it's very hard to do because we live in an individualistic society. People, when they go on a tennis court, they're just thinking of themselves. But you know, it's a double-edged sword if you're not, you know, when you come up against stronger players, and you wouldn't like if the stronger players do that. But so we try very hard to produce. Not have that tennis snob mentality. But when you're playing against, if you're the stronger player, you want to really, you know, you should be coming to the net all the time. There's just no excuse. You know, if you're the weaker player, playing against a stronger player, that makes you a lot better. Now, obviously, if you're practicing by yourself with the ball machine, or you're hitting with a coach, now most of the time should be spent doing the opposite. Now you should be doing a lot of repetition with predictable ball feeds. What you're doing, you're stabilizing strokes. And repetition obviously makes those strokes more consistent. It makes them more accurate, and it increases your confidence you can hit the shot under pressure. So you know, if you're with a group, you should be playing out points. If you're by yourself, you should be drilling strokes. Now, coaches, little trade secret for you. Coaches coaches find this type of lesson really, really difficult to do because it's really boring. Coaches like to, they like to impart their wisdom and their knowledge, and and they just it kind of wears a coach out as well. So what ends up happening is coaches start slowing down the lesson, and giving you too much feedback. But really, if you're preparing for a match, the coach would be drilling you. Remember, you're not trying to change a stroke or learn anything new. You're trying to improve existing skills, and repetition is the mother of skill. Now, the ideal preparation before a match is obviously to do both. You want to do a team practice or play sets, and you want individual repetition. Now, the reality is most people, most people work for a living, or they've got busy lives, and so they can only practice 1 day a week. Now, if you can only do 1 day a week, I would recommend drilling, with a ball machine or practicing with a coach rather than playing out points. Repetition, quality. You're going to get more quality in a repetition, and you're going to get more quantity, and that just trumps playing out points when it comes to match preparation. The day of the match. Now, the day of the match, we've got that here. So number one, the week before the match, play sets, use a ball machine. And if you had to choose one of those two, do ball machine training. Now, the next one down, the day of the match, and that's 24 hours before the match. We include 24 hours before the match. Really, the day before leading up to the match, you want, obviously, the two critical things are good nutrition with an adequate sleep. And what that does is it basically essentially means you're winding up for the night before, so you can let go in the morning. Now, I spent 2 years coaching players on the minor circuit, and I was amazed. 50%. By the way, 50% of the players on the pro tour are dehydrated. In the minor circuit, it's an endemic. There was a line. I remember I was in Florida, a challenger of a futures event, and half the players were at Chipotle getting Chipotle food before their match, and that absolutely, I was staggered by that. How hard it is to win a match, to play on that thing, and they're eating Chipotle. I mean, there's no nutrition, non-existent. That's true, by the way, in all sports. There's a very famous basketball player who used to eat licorice before his matches. So yeah, I mean, nutrition and of course a good night's sleep, which is hard if you're nervous, but a good night's sleep. Those two things. This should go without saying, but it's a massive problem. And most of the what we call the performance enhancement team, or the support system around players. A big part of that now is having a nutritionist on staff, because it's a real problem. But match preparation, so I've got here 24 hours sleep and nutrition. But a big part of match preparation is having the right accessories in your tennis bag. Now, there are some essentials that every player should have, but you want to have the mindset of a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout when it comes to tennis matches. And what I'm going to do is quickly, I'm going to go list the order of importance of items you should have in your bag. And there's about 35, so it's going to take about 5 minutes. Now, but these are things, and by the way, these things I'm listing, they're not abstract ideas. These are things that I've used more than once since moving to Atlanta. But obviously the first thing, you want spare rackets in your bag in case you break a string. There was a member who said to me, it's like a curse, said, well, I never break a string. So, of course, you know what happened, don't you? The handle on her racket broke. And she actually did have a spare racket, and the handle broke on her other racket as well. And we started working out how on earth that could happen. She was a senior. I think what happened was she ran over the rackets in her car. 2 handles broke in a match. So, obviously, spare rackets. The other thing is, the second most important thing, of course, is sports drink. Sodium loss is a big problem, it's particularly in junior tennis, which causes cramp and heat stress. But electrolyte-enhanced fluids overcomes and prevents dehydration and reduces the loss of ions, which is mainly sodium. And also, sports drinks maintain blood glucose levels. And glucose is the primary energy source for the body. And low glucose is the main cause for poor concentration and decision-making. And we track that all the time. Number 3, of course, is a water jug. Water jug. Water jug obviously sends a big water jug sends a psychological statement that you're going to be out there all day long. You know, we watch opponents play our players, and they come out of a big suitcase and a water jug. We know our players are going to be in trouble because it's sending the message that they're basically consistent players and they're going to be out there all day long. All right, number 4 obviously is an overgrip roll. Overgrips used to be changed at least once a set. And in hot weather, you know, to avoid the racket slipping in your hands, and in hot weather, it's to be changed twice a set. You hardly ever see that, but changing grips, it's like a psychological reset button, if nothing else. Obviously, people bring hats, sunglasses, sunscreen. You know, we recommend zinc oxides. Zinc oxides is 100% effective against UV radiation. There's obviously things, you know, where the 70s are over now. We've moved past the 70s, but really wristbands and headbands are the best way to stay dry in your important areas when you sweat. I've never seen an amateur bring a towel on court, and so wristbands and headbands, you hardly ever see it, but very, very important. Obviously, court towels as well. Court towels if you have one of those. String dampeners. I was at Wimbledon one year, and there was a player playing a match. You know, livelihoods are at stake, and the player didn't have a spare string dampener, and the string dampener popped out of the racket, and it actually landed next to where I was sitting on the grass, and I was trying to call the player over and say, here it is. The player couldn't find it, and of course, they're spending the whole time concentrating on the string dampener, and they lost that match. I mean, what you find out when you hang around professional athletes is that they're really brain dead. I mean, they're as dumb as a bag of hammers. They just happen to be A players. Well, you know, athletically they're fantastic, but brain-wise, it's quite shocking. You know, you think that they're actually more smart. They're actually dumber. There's a reason for that, because, you know, when they get pumped up throughout their life, you know, people, program directors, coaches, parents, the support system pumps them up, and everyone's walking on eggshells. They don't want to tell them the truth, and then you see that when they get to the pros. Number 11, and people kind of laugh at these, an umbrella with a stand. All right, you can't fit that in your tennis bag, but you never know when you're playing on a court with no shade, especially at public parks. I was at a professional event in Florida where the person had to basically was in the restroom cooling off with members coming in and out of the bathroom. But an umbrella with a stand, it sounds peculiar, but when you're playing in Florida in 95-degree weather, it won't look silly. I've never seen a player bring an umbrella on the court. I've talked to a lot of players that have played tennis in the past who have now retired, who say they wish they had that. But an umbrella certainly makes it easier to recover between changeovers. And
I played a match one time, Jim, at our facility at Smoke Rise, and the opponent at the changeovers had an umbrella, and she stood underneath it every changeover.
Wow. There you go. I've never seen it. Yeah, I mean, you have a stand. You know, if you have a stand of an umbrella, you don't have to do that.
Right, but she had an umbrella, and she popped it open and stood underneath it every changeover.
Well, I bet if you had a conversation with her, she's had bad experiences in the past where she's been.
Probably, yeah.
You can guarantee it. Similar to, number 12, neck towel. A neck towel is so useful. These toggle towels, they're so useful in extreme heat. We had last season. We had players, and we were very soft on this. You know, we had players basically take 10 minutes between games because it was so hot. And, you know, we should have basically said, you're not allowed to do, actually you are allowed to take 2 10-minute breaks, and after that you have to carry on. But the match took 5 hours because the heat was too bad, and they took 10-minute. Our players never did it, but if I was coaching them, I'd say, you know, you gotta work on cooling down. And there's ice vests now, ice vests you can wear, which really do. I mean, ice vests. I mean, they're a bit heavy and they're expensive, but there's nothing quite like the cyclists use them in professional cycling to cool down before their time trials. Socks. Socks should be replaced when they get saturated, and you should also wear 2 pairs of socks to prevent blisters. Blisters is the worst injury for a tennis player. If there's any doubt on this, I recommend watching Marian Cilic in the 2017 Wimbledon final, or John Isner in the 2020 Australian Open 4th rounds. Marian Cilic lost that final because he had blisters on his feet and he didn't have 2 pairs of socks. And again, you know, here's a professional tennis player and he's just had bad advice all his life. But spare socks, they should be changed if they get saturated. Snacks and power bars, they should be brought on court. I mean, how many times, Paddy, do we have people saying, do you have a banana? And we get people asking bananas. You shouldn't be relying on that. You know, power bars provide electrolytes and they're easily digestible. Here's one that some people, I've seen some of them, not often, are portable scorecards. I put portable scorecards high on the list because without one, and you against an accomplished cheater, it produces chaos. And they're basically little squares and you hang them on the net. So portable scorecards. First aid kit. If your juniors playing tournaments, first aid kits are not always fully stocked. And Band-Aids, aspirins, athletic tape, you carry around with you will get used over the course of the year, guarantee it. It's almost guaranteed. It's never not happens. When I hold tournaments here at the club, one kid will cut his hand opening a can of balls. 17, ice packs. So ice packs are good if you get a strain. A fan is good for changeovers to keep the body cooled. Balls, spare tennis balls. You know, to warm up before the actual match warm up, or in case you play a practice match. So tennis balls in your bag. Swiss Army knife. You would be amazed, it's number 20 now, Swiss Army knife. You would be amazed how often you'll use this tool over the course of a year. You know, the main thing Swiss Army knives are good for, you know, opening zippers on bags, zippers get stuck. But the main thing is to cut out overgrips. When you're changing an overgrip and it gets fused onto the racket handle, a Swiss Army knife's used for that. A portable chair. You can't fit that on a tennis bag, but a portable chair makes, if some courts don't have chairs on them, make sure obviously it's got the rubber things, rubber leg ends, so it doesn't damage the court. Otherwise, there was a fight on a tennis court once I was running in Florida where the person brought a chair, didn't have rubber ends, and he got in a fight with the tournament, the umpire over that. Bug spray. Mosquitoes can be bad. If you're in Florida playing a tournament, the no-see-ums and you're not used to the no-see-ums, we've had people in Florida hospitalized for no-see-ums. So bug spray is a biggie. Strings. Now, obviously, juniors playing week tournaments and nationals, maybe even a weekend tournament. There's over 900 strings on the market. And so if you break a string, you don't want to leave it to chance that a nearby stringing shop has your string. So strings in your bag. Obviously, if you're playing nationals, this is critical. Jump rope. Jump rope is the best piece of exercise equipment there is to warm up a tennis player. And I would hazard in that you know, if you look at our juniors we get them doing jump rope every day, but I would hazard a guess that 50% of our juniors don't have a jump rope in their bag. And the same goes for exercise bands. You know, exercise bands are the best portable exercise resistance equipment there is to maintain and improve muscular strength. And then also, you know, less important perhaps, because if you're going to be using overgrips, but spare racket grips, because you are going to change those occasionally. You know, for juniors, not so much league players, a change of clothes and a towel in case you split sets, so you're fresh for the last set. Although now they're changing it where most of the time in juniors you play a third set tiebreaker. In the old days, you know, you played best of 5 sets at nationals, and so a change of clothes was essential. Net measures. You will use a net measure routinely if you play practice or league matches at a public park, and even in sanction events, a net can be at the wrong height. I saw Wimbledon at one time, an incident where the net was the wrong height, and the player actually had a net measure, and they had to change the net. Running shoes. Running shoes are good if you have a rain delay. You know, books, notepad and pencils to take notes. iPod for music. You know, maybe not so common, but laces. Lace breaking is rare, but it does happen when players retie their shoes in a match. I've seen it more than once. But, you know, look at Tonya Harding at the '94 Olympics, where she broke a skating boot lace before going out to do the long program. You know, it just blows my mind when I see this. You know, a world-class ice skater doesn't have spare laces on their boots. And you think to yourself, how does this happen? Well, you know, it's just You know, when you have very good tennis players, it comes down to the coaches. The coaches basically want to keep that. They want to keep that player. They don't want him to go somewhere else. So they basically walk on eggshells and tell him what they want to hear. But Tonya Harding, she didn't have any. She almost had no time to get a spare pair of laces. Net straps. Net straps maybe not so important, but you know, a lot of public parks in Atlanta don't have net straps. Chris Swin, a member of our club, got into an incident because the temperature was too cold or too. He said it wasn't, and they said it was. And so Chris Swin now brings a thermometer with them, because there's rules about being too cold or too warm, and sometimes players try to reschedule a match due to low or high temperatures, and a thermometer resolves this potential gamesmanship, especially if you're traveling some way to get there. You know, exercise cones, maybe not so much about adults, but juniors. Exercise cones are very good for warming up movement. I'm amazed at people, you know, people don't have joint braces in their bag. Joint with injuries are more and more prevalent, particularly with juniors. Elbow, wrist, ankle. Joint braces can be the difference between finishing a match and forfeiting it. And almost no one has joint braces in their bag. Toilet paper, we've had incident. Toilet paper, not having toilet paper in bathrooms is actually not as uncommon as you think, even at country clubs. That might be kind of a hoarding mentality now, but if there is no toilet paper in the bathroom, you won't make that mistake again. And the final one is a leaf blower. A lot of members laugh at this one. I've been to every court in Atlanta. Basically, every court in Atlanta, almost every court has trees around it. But and almost every court has leaves on it. And you know, when I first came to Atlanta, I was coaching around some of the courts in Atlanta, and every time I went there, you know, not in the summer when the leaves are out, but every court had leaves on it. So if you don't want to play with leaves on courts, bring a leaf blower. Right. So the third thing, obviously, 24 hours for the matches, you want a game plan. Now, players, when they play matches, and we know this because when we ask players what's your game plan, they say things like not make mistakes or I'm trying to win. And so players never have a game plan. But if you want to maximize your physical and technical skills, then having a game plan is essential. Having a game plan does four things. First of all, it makes you feel prepared, and feeling prepared gives you confidence. You know, nervousness, when people get nervous, nervousness is the reason why people get nervous is because you know they can't control the outcome of the match. But nervous really is a function of preparation. If you're fully prepared for a match, you know, if you're nervous deep down, you know that you're not prepared. If you're fully prepared for a match, you shouldn't be nervous. Game plans also help with concentration. The third thing game plans do is they avoid indecision. Visualizing, you know, having a game plan means you're visualizing what to expect, and that leads to better anticipation and execution. You know, most of the time we see people playing tennis, they're winging it. They're just making it up as they go along. And you can see that clearly. And the fourth thing, game plans give you the courage to win. But now research done by sports scientists have shown that if two players or two teams are of equal ability, the player that has the game plan or the team that has the game plan wins 90% of the time. I mean, that's just a staggering stat. And that's been done over and over again. You know, luckily neither team have a game plan. But if one team does have a game plan, they win 90% of the time of equal ability. I think of Martina Hingis. Martina Hingis was a very short player in the age of big mamas. But Martina Hingis credits most of her wins to having a game plan. And I'm reminded of the story of, I heard of the US Davis Cup team playing against Germany in Hamburg in 1985. And the Americans, you know, had a bar, they had a buffet, and they had Bruce Springsteen on video. And the Germans, you know, had a cement floor, metal lockers, and Irian Tiriac pointing his finger at Boris Becker's face. It's like a, you know, and of course, you know, just look at those two scenes, you know he's going to win the match. Now, if both teams or players have a game plan, then the player with a superior game plan wins. And only if, you know, obviously if both players have a game plan, a good game plan, then it comes down to execution. But without
Tim, what's an example of a game plan?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you. I've got the chalkboard here. I'm gonna give you some ideas with doubles. I'll give you some examples. It wants to be simple. But without a game, you're just flying blinds. And the problem, if you don't have a game plan, what tends to happen is that people revert to panicky shot management systems when they're facing resistance from their opponent. And obviously, when we look at matches, we look at people playing matches, and we analyze performance. We call match. But when we analyze match performance, this is the most common thing we see. Now, a game plan for it to be effective is going to be streamlined and simple, right? Simplicity in game plans is the ultimate sophistication, right? They need a game plan where we're able to play with a sense of freedom. You don't want to overthink. You don't want to overthink it. And I tell coaches and parents when they're coaching players and kids, if you're mentioning more than 3 bullet points, then it's information overload. Just giving players a game plan on where to hit serves or where to hit returns can be too much information. Particularly with kids, a kid's brain is already on information overload from pressure and competition. And I know with professional tennis players, they're on automatic pilot. They don't want to think too much at all. There's a very famous example of Coco Vandeweghe, and the coach said to Coco Vandeweghe, he said, just once a game when you're serving, hit a kick serve to the player's backhands. That was one sentence, and Coco Vandeweghe said, "You'll give me too much information." So it's you really have to coaches learn very quickly to be to really simplify a game plan. One thing about game plans. Well, let's go into some ideas. I think I was gonna talk about game plans. I was going to talk about game plans at the end, staying with your game plan, but we can talk about it now. So some examples of game plans, right? I'm going to win from the backcourt. So maybe one of my game plans is I'm going to win from the backcourt, covering lobs, hitting deep. So I'm going to cover lobs. I'm going to try and hit deep, and I'm going to lob down the line to protect my net partner. That's a game plan. I'm going to stay in the backcourt. I'm going to hit the ball deep. I'm going to lob down the line, and I want my net player up at the net, and I'm going to cover lobs. Right, that's a game plan. You're basically playing like a backboard. Maybe your game plan is I'm going to win from the backcourt by not making mistakes. I'm going to not make mistakes. I'm going to rely on my net person to hit all the winners. So that now absolves me of going for too much in you got to have a high shot tolerance for this game plan. What you're basically saying is I can out rally my opponent from the baseline, and I'm going to I'm not going to hit any winners from the baseline. I'm going to rely on my partner to hit all the winners. If you're playing with someone like a Becca Hales, it's not a bad game plan to have, because Becca Hales gets very impatient and she's going to start to poach. And if she knows you're covering lobs and you're consistent, that's a very good game plan. You got to have tactics equals technique. Ultimately, technique technique gives you the tools to carry out a tactical plan. So with game plans, you got to have the techniques to carry out the tactical plan. But if you look at Debbie Citron and Becca Hales, they're expected to win most matches because Debbie Citron is a backboard and Becca Hales is at the net cleaning stuff up. Now, when that situation is reversed, Debbie's at the net, Becca Hales at the baseline. It's a disaster. They lose most of those points. But luckily, they can win more points than they lose doing it the other way. Maybe you're going to win. You're going to win by your game plan is, well, I'm not very good at the baseline. I just can't maintain a rally. But I'm gonna win more points at the net. So I'm really focused on my net game. I'm at the net, I'm going to win lots of points there. Maybe I'm going to come into the net. I'm going to win points by coming into the net. If you come into the net, of course, your partner has to cover lobs. Otherwise, you're going to get lobbed down the line. So the partner has to stay back. But it's something like that. You're kind of you're good at staying at the baseline. If the idea is, well, I'm going to be at the baseline. And I'm just going to hit the ball cross court all the time and hope my opponent misses. That's not really a game plan. You haven't thought out, well, what happens if you get lobbed down the line? What happens if, so really, most club players win from the backcourt. They don't come to the net. So they're going to work out how they're going to win from the backcourt. Are they going to lob down line? But those are some examples of game plans.
Okay.
General, when it comes to game plans, cue cards should certainly be handed out to players for a match. You know, these are short notes written on index cards, you know, on where to serve and return or hit ground strokes, those kind of things. You know, club players, they just like to serve into the box. So, you know, for juniors, maybe for some of our juniors, serve return patterns are important. Club players, it's more a question of where you're going to hit ground strokes. Obviously, doubles, you're going to hit ground strokes cross court most of the time. You know, singles, it becomes a bit more complicated. But certainly cue cards, kind of, it creates an island in the storm. If you know what type of strategic play your opponent is, you know, do they stay back or come in? That helps. Are they left-handed or not? Without a game plan, by the way, lefties have an edge because approximately 85% of the players are right-handed. And so 85% of the time, lefties are playing righties. But having a game plan avoids this indecision and gets players visualizing what to expect, which leads to better anticipation and execution. General notes, what to do if a match is close, how to compete against. We get this question asked all the time. We answer it every day, and people still come back and ask the same question: how to compete against a pusher? What to do if you're getting pushed around because you're getting outgunned? I mean, we get asked these weekly, and to be honest, the coaching staff got so sick and tired about. We handed out cue cards to our C team ladies, and so they actually had notes. If you play against a pusher, this is what you should do. You should both stand in no man's land, right? The reason why at club tennis, if players are back at the baseline, they get drop shots. So they need to cover the drop shot. So if they stand here at the service box line, they get locked because they're not very good at running backwards. So what we say to them against a pusher is, if you're both standing in no man's lands, you've covered all your options. And what happens is the pusher now starts to try and hit down at the person's feet, which they're not very good at, and that allows these two people to go and attack and isolate this net person. And what tends to happen when this is successful is that this person moves back to the baseline. So you've got these two here, and if these two now, when they get a short ball, they can carve angles off the court. But we actually handed out cue cards on those scenarios with our C team ladies last season. Interestingly, only one player in the whole season actually took their cue card out in a match to read it when they were in trouble. So, you know, it's habit forming stuff. All right, the third thing, we're going to zip through this now. The third thing is when you arrive at the match site. We had a member last week saying about, you know, when she gets there early, people like to get there and they don't know what to do. Arriving at the match site, even before the start of the match, you should make sure you should be focused and ready to go. And so, you know, part of the game plan you've prepared the night before should include a routine where what to do when you're waiting to play. Well, obviously, you should warm up your strokes if you can. That's not always possible. But the most important thing you should do is visualize. Visualize your up-and-coming match. And this consists of two visualizations. The first one is watching high-quality pro tennis on your phone for about 20 minutes before the start of the match. It takes about 20 minutes, but when you watch high-quality tennis points, those images get stored in the part of the brain called the premotor cortex, and that allows you, when you play tennis, that information gets moved over to the motor cortex. And actually, you can see when you do it, when you watch tennis matches and then you go out and play, you're more fluid and smooth, you play less inhibitive, and that's the power of visualization. And anytime you watch tennis on TV and go out and play, you're more fluid and relaxed and you play better. And it's because those images are stored in the premotor cortex that then get transferred to the movement. The other thing you should be doing, obviously, is visualizing your match in your mind while you're playing. And so you got Patty there and got Debbie. Braxton, remember Braxton? There's Joyce.
Hi.
Hey, Joyce.
Hey, Coach Joyce.
Learn me a lot.
Yeah, this is great.
I hope you're taking notes.
Visualizing the match in your mind while you're playing with play your favorite music at the same time. That's important. You know, just visualizing how you're going to play out points. This is called induced visualization, but it makes you play better with less stress. It just reduces stress, and to me, it's the best form of pre-match preparation there is. A couple of weeks ago, we did a talk on relaxation skills, and you know, hypnosis was mentioned. If you can, you know, I think hypnosis would be illegal because it gives you a massive unfair advantage. But if you have hypnosis training before match, you're playing fearless tennis. But I think of Tracy Austin when she played in the juniors, she credits her success with visualizing how she was going to play the match. Patrick Rafter is another example. Patrick Rafter credits his 2 US Opens with visualizing. And of course, the most recent example is the Canadian Andrzejewska, I can't pronounce her name, Andrzejewska or something. She visualizes 50 minutes a day. Just a final note on match preparation. 7 out of 10 matches are lost before the first ball is ever hit. Particularly in the juniors, because of preconceived judgments about opponents. And so in terms of an opponent's ranking, their size, etc., it's always better if you don't know who you're playing against. We had I remember an example of a guy. I worked at one of the best academies in the world, and the guy went to Sweden for the summer to play some Swedish players. He was playing the top ITF juniors in the world. He didn't know who they were, and he kicked their butts. And then, if he knew who they were, he would have played differently. But the ladies' teams tend to do this. They tend to find out where their teams are in the standings. It's just an added cross you have to carry now. You just don't want to know. You just don't want to know who you are. I was very good friends with a coach in Florida who played against Kevin Curran when he was at college. Kevin Curran got to the finals of Wimbledon the year Boris Becker won. And this guy beat Kevin Curran because he didn't know who he was. And he was a top college player. The fourth thing, so that was obviously, don't worry about your opponent's records, visualize. The fourth thing now is starting the match. And so when you're starting a match, one important part of the game plan is warming up properly. Warming up is really turning on the run switch. And I hate watching people warm up because they're just never engaged. I mean, it's painful watching it. But really, the warm up, you should be focusing on getting height, depth on the shots, spin on shots, putting the right spin on your shots. You're preparing for and people just warm up like they're not engaged. And you can see every year I do a little game. I go to the BB&T or every professional tournament I go to, and I look at how the players warm up before their matches, particularly 2 days before the start of the tournament, and I predict how far those guys are going to go in the tournament. And the correlation is incredibly 80-90% of the time. I remember the year I watched Magnus Bangdadis warming up, and I saw how he warmed up, and I predicted he would get to the final, and he did get to the final. You watch Donald Young warming up. When you watch Donald Young warming up, it's hitting giggles. It's like the Keystone Cops. And it's rare he gets past any rounds. But just watching professional players, how they warm up, and then trying to predict where they're going to end up in the draw, you'll be amazed how the correlation. But the warm-up should also be where you're working on trying to relax. Just a note on Donald Young. I'm criticizing him. Donald Young. I was at the Orange Bowl the year Donald Young won the Orange Bowl, the youngest ever player to do it, and he was warming up the same way as he does now, just hitting giggle, and he won the Orange Bowl. So I don't want to come across it, But I would argue that style, Donald Young, very loose and goosey and relaxed. He's not taking warm up seriously. I would argue that's one reason why he's very inconsistent. If you look at Steffi Graf warming up and Rafael Nadal warming up in the juniors. Andy Roddick warming up in the juniors and how they warm up now. Juniors warm up the same way as you do in the pros generally. And